throttle response, very, very quick.
Well, frankly, it's the dead sexy one.
They've done such a good job with the design of this. They've toned it down to 9 instead of pumping up to 11 like with the Dolphin.
Those who simply call it a copy of the Model 3 are either visually impaired or Tesla shareholders.
BYD is probably the largest company that you've never heard of. It's absolutely massive. It already sells more cars with a plug than any other manufacturer in the world.
And the good news is they've been expanding massively over the past few months, and they will be continuing that over the next year or so. They're going global in a big way. But the thing is, I don't think BYD is perceived as a cool brand. I still think they have a little bit of a brand issue, but I think with this car, that's all about to change.
It's going to be a competitor for the Tesla Model 3, for the Hyundai Ioniq 6 and for the Volkswagen ID.7, and it is, in the top spec form, a serious performance car.
It's compact, athletic, and covered in interesting details that reference its ocean theme. From the ripple pattern on the front fascia to the water droplets on the C-pillar and taillights. Those who simply call it a copy of the Model 3 are either visually impaired or Tesla shareholders.
So let's start with design. Now, if you're playing in the premium market, it makes sense to hire a designer with experience of premium cars. And that's what BYD have done. A previous Audi head of design, who was responsible for the first Audi e-tron, along with the Audi R8, now heads up the brand's design team. And I think they've come up with a really handsome looking car. It's swoopy, it's low to the ground, it's got nice features like the retractable door handles which help to make it more aerodynamic. All models get that lovely panoramic sunroof fitted as standard, and it comes in a choice of 4 standard colours. If you're comparing it with the Hyundai Ioniq 6 or the Model 3, its most direct rivals, then I actually think it wins on the design front.
Of course, BYD is primarily an engineering company when design's kind of an afterthought, but not with this one, at all. There's some beautiful design touches, but it's all to increase things like efficiency. So for example, these diffusers, not just for looks, that's functional to help create the most slippery car they can, therefore making it more efficient in terms of range. The back end is a little bit blobby. I'm not such a fan of that, nor am I such a fan of these kind of teardrops here. That ocean theme is a little bit OTT for my liking, but they've toned it down a lot here, so it's not too overbearing. Now, I think the overall design of this is so simplistic. They've really been able to tone it down while still thinking about that efficiency. It's got these lovely kind of grille bits down here, again, to help with the flow of the air going past the car, and they look cool, and it means it rides quite low as well. That's quite a low car, but it's also quite low because the CTB architecture. So they've been able to make the entire car around about 10% 10% lower.
And just in case you need a reminder of what your car's 0 to 62 time is, then that's right down here. The BYD Seal 3.8S. Nope, never seen that on a car before.
But if you can handle the design, you'll be rewarded with an interior that generally feels premium and well put together. The seats on long-range and performance models are trimmed in real leather, and all but the cheapest version have a heated and cooled front row, though they lack the heated rear seats of the Model 3.
But it is like they've had loads of really nice ideas, but just not been able to pare them back and have thrown everything at it. We've got stripes down there, we've got cushioning in here, a bit of quilting, lots of stitching on the curves on the dashboard, lots of different shapes and materials. But actually, when you start to dig down into it, it's really nice quality in here. Start to look at the stitching. BYD, build your dreams. Start to look at the stitching, and it's all really nicely done. You feel sort of down here around the centre console. Nice, it feels nice. None of those cheap plastics that you can feel. Things do feel well put together. Look, it might not be your taste in here necessarily, but it actually is a very kind of comfortable place to be.
This interior is so much more toned down than, say, the Atto 3. which had the silly guitar strings in the doors and lots of other strange vents and things on the dash. They've dialed this down but upped the quality of materials. They've got this lovely kind of Alcantara material on the dash. There is a bit of cheap plastic around here, but it's designed quite nicely and it's quite toned down. Of course, they have the wonderful screens. I've got my heads-up display as well. I've got some just practical things in here. I've got space for 2 phones to charge down here. Now they do talk about the ocean theme in here, about how part of the steering wheel is like the fin of a, I don't know, an ocean animal. Apparently this dashboard screen is meant to be the heart of the ocean, but I thought the ocean was full of plastic rubbish. Anyway, they're overdoing it with the ocean theme, but anyway, it's a nice interior.
Equally impressive is the interior. It's very high quality, great seats, nice screens. It does the rotating screen trick as well, this one. There's good space in the back, a reasonable boot.
Another thing is that the seats are really comfortable. Yeah, I think that probably the quilting adds to that, but there's also a lot of adjustment in them. So I think whatever your height and your shape, you're going to find you know, a comfortable position in here.
Now the seats for me, I think they're okay. The quality is much better than the Dolphin, for example, but they don't really grip you very well. Now they've got these big bolsters. Perhaps I'm a bit slimmer than you know I should be, but they don't actually grip you very well. So that's one kind of downside. Everything in here is quite low and quite squat, which would make the cabin feel very small, but I've got this massive screen up here. Again, it blocks all the UV light so my head doesn't burn. And luckily I've got my BYD engineer's hat on today. The other thing I want to point out in here, apart from all the drive modes in here, which are tactile buttons, fantastic, well done, is... Now, of course, it wouldn't be a BYD without a healthy dose of practicality. And it comes with 320 litres of boot space. Now, it's not actually that big. It's quite deep, but it's not very tall. It does have a handy compartment down here, though. So we're here at the front of the car, and this is where I can tell you about the frunk. The frunk has 53 litres of space. So in total, you get around 370 litres of storage space. The other thing you'll notice is just how low this front end is. That's all to help with the drag coefficient. This is a very slippery car. It's got a 0.219 CD drag coefficient, which is very, very low for a car like this.
As actually is this large, it's 15.6 inch screen, which we've seen on other models, of course, and it does BYD's party trick of, ooh, it rotates. Which actually I think I'm probably one of the only people who finds that really useful, because I like it in portrait rather than landscape. I know lots of people don't see the point in them, but I do. And when you start to dig into this, it's of course a similar screen to the one we've seen in other cars, but it has a lot more functions. So if you go into here, you've got all the driver assistance programs that you need, everything you need to know about charging, all your vehicle settings, all the different configurations you can get for the chassis and the steering. So there's an awful lot going on in there. You're really going to need to take your time to get used to it. But again, I've got to say, I mean, it looks fine. You know, it's okay. It's not got all the gizmos and the gadgets that a Model 3 might have, but everything that is there seems to be fairly slick, and it seems to have everything that you need.
The Seal uses BYD's latest EV architecture called E-Platform 3.0. However, unlike other E-Platform vehicles like the BYD Yuan Plus and the Dolphin, it has cell-to-body technology. What that means is that the battery pack itself is actually integrated into the structure of the car. The goal of this is to increase rigidity and decrease weight. Sandwiched into that structure is one of 2 lithium iron phosphate battery packs. Standard range cars use a 61.4 kilowatt-hour pack, delivering 550 kilometers of CLTC range, while long-range models utilize an 82.5 kilowatt-hour unit to go up to 700 kilometers.
This should have a very good range. It's also the fastest BYD model to charge because it will cope with 150 kilowatt charging. That's much, much better than the Dolphin and much, much better than the Atto 3 crossover.
BYD never really thought about driving dynamism before, but here they are with this car, a really sporty saloon, and doing a great job about it.
So get the Seal off the Autobahn and onto a nice stretch of road like this. And again, it's just a really enjoyable car to drive. The steering generally has a really nice balance to it. And given that the Seal weighs in at around 2 tons, you've got very little body roll going into corners. And a really nicely measured throttle control. Add to that the torque vectoring that it's got, and it does feel nice and agile and responsive.
Because it's not light, so the all-wheel drive version, that's the more expensive one, not the one we're driving today, that weighs 2,150 kg. This one, the rear-wheel drive version, with only one motor, weighs 1,850 kg. This car also has ridiculous 0 to 60 times as well. So for the all-wheel drive model, the dual motor one, not the one we're in today, 3.8 seconds to 60. That's very rapid. This one is the single rear motor one, so that does 0 to 60 in I think about 5.9 seconds, which is plenty fast enough.
BYD has really thought about getting the driving dynamics right for this car, and it does show. Using its Blade battery, which incidentally is made without any cobalt or nickel, as a structural component has made the car feel stronger and stiffer, and that's very good. It's also the first BYD to get independent suspension with double wishbone at the front along with a 5-link rear suspension. And this all-wheel drive version gets the brand's frequency selective damping technology, which basically allows the dampers to adjust to the changing road conditions, all of which adds together to give it that impressive solid ride quality and helps to smooth out any bumps in the road.
And I think what BYD are doing every year is getting better and better and better, and to produce a car like this is astounding, even compared to just a couple of years ago when we were driving the Han and even the Dolphin last year. This is a fundamental, huge step forwards for BYD. And I really hope they can continue on that path of more efficiency, more optimization.